Итак, добрый вечер всем. Давайте начнем.
Good evening, everybody. Let's
Я
begin.
буду рассказывать тему, которая является неким продолжением
I'll
того,
tell
о
you
чем
about
говорили
a
сегодня
topic
весь
which
день.
is a continuation of what we've been speaking during the whole day. Data was leaked, but what did happen if this data was leaked a long time ago, 1 year ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago? And how did I come to this topic? Well, approximately 10 years I'm involved in bug bounty, and at a certain moment of time I understood that I've started discovering more leakages than some technical vulnerabilities.
Примерно в 2021 году
And
я начал
approximately in
очень активно
2021,
направлять утечки
I've
в разные
started
бug-баунти
actively
программы
sending
обнаружил
these data
некоторую
leakages
интересную
to bug
закономерность.
bounty programs, and I
Что,
found
во-первых,
interesting
компаниям очень сложно работать с
law.
утечками в рамках
It is
bug-баунти программ.
very
Потому
difficult to
что
work with data
очень
leakages
часто
in
эти
bug
данные
bounty
старые,
programs, because very
не
often
очень
this is an
понятно,
old
кому
data,
их отправлять,
not really
не очень
understandable
понятно, как
who
их
should
закрывать,
receive it,
и не очень понятно,
not
как за них
understandable how to
платить.
close them, and not understandable how
И
to
в
pay
тот
for
момент
them.
я подготовил
And
доклад
at that moment
на
of time,
Positive Hack
I've
Days
prepared a
2021
presentation
года,
for the
где
Positive Hack Days
рассказывался о том, как эти
2021, where I've
утечки
been
можно
telling about
искать,
how these
кому их
data
можно
leakages can be
сдавать и
searched
что в них
for, who
интересного.
can you
И
submit them
казалось
to,
бы,
and
в
what's so
принципе, все
interesting in
хорошо. С
them.
точки зрения
And basically,
исследователя
well,
вы
it looks
находите
like
утечки,
everything is very
получаете
interesting. You find
вознаграждение,
certain data
компании их
leakages,
закрывают,
you
данные
get
пользователей
reward, the company
безопасности.
closes it,
Но
and
оказалось, что
data of the
есть две
user is
глобальные
safe.
проблемы.
But there are
То есть
two
первое —
global
это то,
problems here.
что в тот
First
момент,
one
когда
is that
я находил
at that moment of
утечку,
time, when I've been
зачастую оказывалось,
finding
что
these data
данные
leakages,
утекли,
it
может
figured
быть,
out
год
that the
назад,
data was
иногда
leaked
несколько лет
1 year
назад.
ago, sometimes several
И
years
вторая
ago.
проблема, которая
And the second
влияет
problem
как на исследователя, так и на
that
компанию, это то,
influences
что
both
не очень
researcher
понятно, а
and
кто
the
вообще
company,
владелец
it's
тех
not really
данных, которые
understandable
утекли.
who is the
Потому
owner
что,
of this
например, мы
data that
нашли
was
гигантский
leaked,
архив, в котором
because we have
находятся данные
discovered
таксистов,
big
но таксисты какой
archive about
компании
taxi
это?
drivers. But
Или,
taxi
может
drivers
быть,
of
это
which
кто-то
company
просто
they
собрал
are?
абстрактные данные, назвал данные таксистов и
Well, this
пытается их, в
was an
общем,
abstract
шантажировать.
data, and they are
И для
trying
начала
to
я
blackmail
расскажу о
somebody.
том, какие утечки кратко бывают и
Well, I'll
какие
tell you
интересны
which
именно с
type
моей
of
точки
data
зрения.
leakages do exist
У
and
нас
which are
есть
interesting from
классические
my point of
проблемы с
view.
открытыми базами
We have
данных.
classical
Это
problems with
различные
open
системы
databases,
дезавторизации, без
different systems
аутентификации.
without
Это
authorization, without
различные логи,
authentication. These are
лежащие в
different
публичном доступе. Это
logs
различные
which are in
архивы
the public
бэкапов.
access, different archives,
Это
backups,
разные публичные документы,
different
разные
public
хранилища
documents,
с
various
инструкциями для пользователей. То есть, по
data
сути, все
storages
то,
for the
что может быть
instructions
интересно
for the user,
злоумышленнику, и
something
все то,
that
что
can be
может быть
interesting to the
доступно
criminals
снаружи.
and something
И
that can
я
be
на этом
available
слайде
from
показал,
outside.
что есть,
So
в
on this
принципе,
slide, I
два
wanted to show you
типа
that in principle there are two
утекающей
types
информации.
of
Это
leaking
та
or leaked
информация,
data.
которая
It's the
находится на серверах
information
компании, и
which
та
is
информация,
in a
которая
corporate servers and
расположена где-то
information
снаружи.
which is
В
located
чем
somewhere
принципиальное отличие?
outside.
Если
What
вы
is the principal
обнаружили
difference
какую-то
between
утечку,
them?
которая
If you discovered
находится
some data
на ваших
leakage which is
серверах,
located
вы
on
практически
your
всегда ее можете
servers,
оперативно закрыть.
practically
Потому что
you
если
can
вы знаете,
always
что на
close
вашем
it.
сервере лежит
Because
какой-то
if you
файл,
do know that on
очень
your server
маловероятно, что
there's
вам
a certain
потребуется
file,
год, чтобы
it's
найти
a
этот
very small
сервер и этот
probability
файл
that will
удалить.
take
Но
years
при
to
этом
discover the server
утечки
and remove
именно
this file.
файлов, расположенных
But
на серверах
file
компании, зачастую
leakages
гораздо более
located on a corporate
разрушительны.
site
Потому
are
что,
more
во-первых,
destructive
пользователи в
in many
принципе
cases
очень
because
адекватны.
users
Они понимают,
are
что вряд ли
pretty
стоит
adequate.
выгружать,
They
например, всю
understand that
медицинскую
it
базу
makes
данных
no
какой-нибудь
sense to
клиники,
upload medical
выкладывать ее на
database
Google
of the
диск
clinic,
и открывать
post it
доступ
on a
для всех.
Google disk,
А
and
вот
open
если
access for
инженер проводил,
everybody.
например,
But
работы на
if an
сервере,
engineer
сделал
has
идеальную
conducted
копию
works on
и
a
случайно
server and
положил
making a
ее не
backup
туда,
copy
он
and
даже не
putting it in
задумывается
the
о
wrong
том, что его
place,
действия могли
he didn't
привести
even
к
think
утечке.
that his actions could lead to
А
this
в
data
случае
leakage.
облачных сервисов есть другие
In the
проблемы.
case of
Мы
cloud
видим
services,
файл,
there are
он
some other
буквально перед
problems. We
глазами.
see the
Мы
file.
можем
It's
выгрузить всю
just in front of your
информацию,
eyes.
но
You can
зачастую
upload
мы
all
не
the
можем
information,
понять,
but
кому
very
этот файл
often you
принадлежит и
cannot
кому идти,
understand
чтобы
who is the
он его
owner of this
закрыл.
file. Who should you go
Но
to
при
close
этом
this
в
file
облачных
from the
сервисах на самом
access?
деле реже
But in
попадаются
cloud
критичные
services,
данные, потому что
seldom
пользователь все-таки
you see
старается не
critical data
выкладывать туда
because
что-то особо
users are trying not
конфиденциальное.
to post
Но
something
при
very
этом
confidential
данные
out there.
бывают абсолютно случайные,
However,
непредсказуемые,
data
и иногда они
can be
могут
very
привести до
unpredictable, and
разрушительных
sometimes
последствий.
this data can have
Приведу простой пример.
destructive consequences. I
А,
will make a simple example.
Один из недавно найденных файлов.
One of recently
Его
discovered
владелец —
files,
это
its owner
некий
was
человек, у которого
some
вообще
person
непредсказуемый никнейм, непонятно, кто это
with a
такой,
very
но при
unpredictable
этом
nickname. Nobody
содержимое этого
understood
файла
who is
абсолютно
that, but the
разрушительно
content
для
of this file
компании, чьи
is
данные там
absolutely
находятся.
destructive for the
И
company
я
whose data
привел
is located in
фрагменты
this
из
file.
моего доклада 2021
I've shown
года,
the fragment of my
где я
presentation for
описывал,
the year
что, собственно,
2021
есть
where I've
такая проблема,
described
и, как вы
that
видите,
there
на
is a
ней
problem
излюбил
like that. And as you can see, it has not changed. It's very difficult to find who is the data owner. and it's very difficult to understand what is to be done with it. In addition to that, there's additional interesting situation that very often we have a lot of like garbage lakes, because if you look at some Telegram chats, Telegram channels, yes, there's a lot of chats which contain some protected information, but these can be screenshot of documents which have three important lines, and they're not really important for the activity of the company in general. And let's assume that we have found certain data leakage. What is to be done? First thing, in most of the cases, we have to close the information source. Why is it important? First of all, it's a reputational action, because if the data leakage happened, it has to be closed. It's very strange if the file is still available, even though if criminals have already stolen all the data. After this, it is necessary to stop data upgrade from the source, because periodically there were very interesting situations when, for example, I sent information to the bug bounty program that they have certain Google document which has data from 30,000 users. The company accepts this report, does confirm that this problem is still important, these are real data, and at the same time I see how this Google document is being updated, information about additional 5,000 users, additional 10,000 users comes to this file, and then after a few months this document is being closed. But you have to understand that closure of the source of leakage is not the initial task for all of us in most of the cases, because in some cases, for example, if we have leaked a file with passwords, first you have to start changing those passwords and then stop the leakage. And it's very important to work together with the data owner whose data was leaked. Because if you have not told to the person that his data that he manages leaked and it led to problems, then at a certain moment of time this person may come to work, and in the best case he can open this access, and at least you will know where to search for this data, because there is a link, and in 1 month you can check that the data is still available. But in the worst case, he's going to tell you that the bad security guys came to him, screamed at him, and he did a data copy and posted this data once again, and everybody can use it once again. Well, I've made an illustration how the ideal picture looks like of data closure and further work with it. On this graph, we have not signed coordinates, because this could be hours, depending from how fast the company operates. This could be days, this could be months. We have never reached years, but in the future we can reach these periods of time. So in the beginning, cloud service or some chat, well, is being used by people actively. At a certain moment of time, it's been discovered, and together with the discovery, they start closing, well, after the discovery, this leakage has been closed, and at the same time, minimize the consequences, mitigate the consequences, and afterwards, this chart or this document, well, nobody's using it. Ideal picture looks like that. Reality is totally different very often. Some service is being used, data leaks from this service. At a certain moment of time, this problem is being discovered, and they postpone it for several weeks because the team that is involved in report analysis from bug bounty is involved in something else. After this, they start closing this leak. And periodically after this, they start minimizing the consequences, because on a regular basis, I've seen this situation when I discover some file which contains passwords. I send it to bug bounty program. They close it very fast, but passwords can still be valid a few weeks after. Only after that they start changing them. And very often the most interesting starts again, because users have to work, the file appears again, nobody has warned them, nobody helped them to organize convenient systems for work, and they have opened this file once again. And one of the most interesting phenomena which influence this, how easy and how difficult it's going to be to work with leakages, it's chat tree. It's an example from presentation from the year 2023 when I've been describing typical situation that is happening when you research some data leakage. You discover a certain data source, some open channel, open Google document, page in motion or something else, and you see the link to another chat, which is closed. In this closed chat, you see the link to some Google document, and it is Google document linked to the ICQ. What kind of ICQ you can speak about in the year 24? Many of us don't use it for a long period of time, but it figures out that many companies in the year 2021, this messenger had a salvation, because when they had problems of access to Telegram, many companies have transferred their processes to ICQ. And when they have returned them to other messengers, they didn't close a lot of things. And this is an example of real data leakage, a little bit more unified. We have a full system of chats, documents, which are used in the company. There's a chat with general information, there's a chat with employees, they have different channels with links to different documents, also ICQ links as well. And why this chat tree, or this very complicated chat tree, so important when we discuss the leakage point? Because how the vulnerability closure leak closure happens. We found a source, we walked around documents, we found the links to the next chat, we found the link to a certain document, we've closed them, and we think that the problem is closed. But honestly speaking, there's a big number of other materials which have been accessible for a long period of time to anybody, and you could go to the direct link to them or by transfers. And sometimes we have a data swamp, as I call it. It's a situation when all the public sources of information about a data leak are closed. You cannot find it anyway. But if somebody who had access to these files previously and stored them, this person still has other documents being open to him, and they are updated, they have actual information. And for the criminal, this can be a very good discovery because, well, this person has access to critical data and nobody else has this access because nobody is permitted to enter this. And we have one very important question and two answers. Who was able to get timely access to this data? These could be researchers and these could be criminals. Researchers, these are white and gray hackers, because very often researchers, they don't want to use this data they've discovered, and gray hackers, they don't want to use this data even if they are going to be paid. And in some cases, they want glory and they want to tell that they have discovered serious data leakage in a big company, but at the same time, they're not going to publish this data itself. And that is interesting for the researchers. Researchers, they don't have any negative intentions, but if you will not work with them properly, they can get angry, they can go to category of black hackers, and there is a very interesting moment. Not many people pay attention to it, that researcher can break, because if you will search through special servers of leaks, you will find very interesting accounts, compromised accounts of very interesting researchers who have all the data to access to many.
But in this case, it's much more easier. They found a leak and they start to exploit the leak, or maybe they will not exploit the leak because it's useless for them. Maybe they will use it because they have all the necessary data, and if leak happened today, nobody can guarantee that this data would be exploited 3 years after. And now let's talk a little bit about bug bounty leaks. This is the moment which really brings me joy. Many companies, including Russian companies, pay a lot for bug bounty events. At the same time, paying for the data, which you can get access to through normal vulnerabilities and through data leaks, are not comparable. You can get basically 2 million for a serious vulnerability, but if you find the same data uploaded to some storage, you would be paid 20,000 rubles, and that's all. Many companies, subjectively fewer than those that pay, do not consider leaks as a security problem. They believe that this is something which is part of social engineering, but bug bounty is about technical leaks, not social leaks. There's an interesting point in terms of communication and interaction between researchers and the company. In many cases, researchers or people who look for potential bug bounties, what do they do? Well, they found multiple solutions, multiple bugs, and they can stretch this period and then send them one by one and get more money. And this would take more time, and data or personal data would be vulnerable. And obviously, if a company wouldn't pay right here, right now, then researchers would listen and wait until they get money. So both sides lose. Now we have two very important questions. It's 2024. In 2021 and 2020, many companies decided to work remotely. They had to do so, started to work with cloud solutions. Lots of data was uploaded to clouds without any preparation. So now question, if you have a data leak, do you have enough of a backlog to reproduce your data, your original data? How did it manage? How did it end up in the cloud solution? Who had access and so on? And next question, how your logs in your system are trustworthy. Maybe your logs, maybe somebody would tell you they deleted all the logs because they had too much data. And are you confident that this service would provide you with this information? Many companies would tell you that you have this interface and we don't have to provide you with the technical logs. When we are talking about old leaks, and by old leaks I mean several years, here are some typical issues we face. Nobody knows who owned the file. If it's a recent leak, you can go around your colleagues, you can ask the business, and you can understand it. This was this kind of business process. Here, the initiator, you can address this person and try to find where you can actually investigate. But if it was a few years ago, the person might have moved on, the whole department might have been closed. And in some cases, the owner does not want to help the company. Maybe they did not end very well. And many employees believe that old leaks are not relevant. It's 5 years old data. It cannot be relevant. But is it true? Let's consider three options. First one is when all data is not relevant, when it can be relevant, and when it becomes even more relevant with time. The classical non-relevant data is different revoken tokens or passwords which were generated by accident. They were changed and they basically are useless. Maybe this is some kind of information that become publicly available. For example, some public report before it's published is very confidential, but after it's published, this is data that should be available to everyone. That being said, passwords can become relevant, maybe they were not changed, or maybe some person uses some principle, and this principle can be hacked, and next passwords can be hacked too. For many companies, the leak itself might not be a problem, but the service where the leak happened might be a problem. So, for example, if they collected user data from Google Documents and then these data were found in a leak, even though the leak itself is not a problem, it could become a problem for the company. Still, some leaks can become more problematic with time. If a company started to work with more data, then the passwords, which were not changed, become more valuable. A company could change its status, it could get more important businesses and assignments, it can become a monopolist, or maybe get into a conflict with other company or former employees. And in this case, somebody tries to find at least some fault, some error in this company and try to get inside. Or laws may change. For example, non-critical leak a few years ago might become critical now. And this actually happens because leaks are assessed against mass user, not when data was published, but when it was found. So if some big company would leak 2015 data, it will be discussed just as well as some relevant database
И приведем
would have been
пример
leaked.
данных, которые стали критичны.
And now let's talk
Например,
about
одна
critical
строительная
data.
компания,
For
это
example, there was a
немного
construction
измененное определение
company.
реальной утечки данных, получила заказ на
We
работу.
obviously changed this example,
Казалось бы,
and they had
типичный документ.
an assignment.
Но в
It
какой-то
seems like a
момент
normal document,
один из
but at
заказчиков,
some
а
point,
именно
one of the
компания
customers,
«Треугольник», получила очень
the
важные
company named
заказы по своей
Triangle,
основной деятельности,
they
и
had
для
very
злоумышленников
important
интересны
assignments for
любые
their main
проблемы, которые
activity,
могут быть связаны с этой компанией, для того,
and they
чтобы
wanted
получить доступ
to
в
avoid
офисы
any
или
potential
получить доступ в
problems.
инфраструктуру. И зачастую, когда речь идет об очень
Oftentimes,
старых утечках,
when we are
меняются
talking
заинтересованные
about very
подразделения,
old
потому
leaks,
что
departments
одна из основных
change.
проблем,
Because
которых
one of the main
говорим, когда
problems
обсуждаем
which
утечки,
we
это
discuss
репутационный риск.
when
Но
talking about
репутационный риск,
leaks
он
are
существует
reputation
не сам по
risks.
себе.
But reputation
Он
risks
влияет на
are
то, что
not there
компания
in
сможет выполнять
vacuum.
какие-то
It
действия,
means that
что
a
их не станет
company
выполнять очень трудно.
can perform some
То есть,
activity.
например,
And
если
if
у
reputation
компании
risks
утекли
incur,
данные о
it will be
рекламе,
very hard for
да,
them
ей
to do
будет
so.
сложнее работать с
If
рекламодателями. Но это не особо
they would
влияет на
have, if they
IT-подразделение.
would suffer their
А
reputation
если
risks with
произошли
the marketing
какие-то
team,
конфликты, например, между
they would have problems
разработчиками
with
и HR,
different
то найм
companies in
существенно
marketing,
затруднится,
but it would
но в
not
то же
have any
время на
problems
рекламу это
in
может
their
все равно не
IT.
повлиять. И почему этот
And if
вопрос
they
очень
have
важен в
problems
случае
in
старых
IT
утечек?
department,
Потому что в
this might
некоторых
be a problem
ситуациях
when
со
working with other
временем,
IT companies,
со
but it will not
временем
affect
то
their
лицо
marketing
или то
at all.
подразделение, которое
It means
максимально
that
пострадает от этой утечки,
the
может
department
измениться.
which will suffer the
Раньше это было
most
IT,
can
теперь
change.
это HR,
Previously, it was
а через
IT,
несколько
now
лет это может быть
it's
какое-нибудь
HR,
организационное управление.
and in a few years, it could be marketing team or
И
operational
очень
team.
частая проблема, которую
A
очень
very
легко избежать.
important problem
Компании
which can be
зачастую
avoided.
собирают очень сомнительные данные.
Companies
Например, это
collect very
точно, это
questionable
тоже
data.
пример одной из
For
много
example,
измененных утечек.
here is
Компания
a
собирала
changed
данные
leak,
о кандидатах
data collected
и очень
on
жестко их
potential
комментировала.
candidates,
Но что
and
произойдет
there
со
were some
временем, если через
harsh
несколько лет
comments. But
этот
what
кандидат
happens
станет
if in a
каким-нибудь
few
важным
years
общественным
this
деятелем,
candidate would
известным в
become
своей
a
области
public
лицом?
leader, maybe a very important
Поэтому
person,
есть очень
a
простой
celebrity
совет,
of a
что
kind? So
не
there
надо
is a
собирать
very
излишние
good
данные,
advice.
и
You should
надо
not
всегда
collect
контролировать, что
excessive
пишете
data,
вы
and you
или
should
ваши
control
сотрудники в документах.
what you write or what your employees write in
И
documents.
очень частая причина утечек — это либо
Oftentimes,
руководители, либо сотрудники звезд.
either
Потому что примерно, наверное, половина тех
managers
утечек,
or
которые я
employees
нахожу, она
who think they are
связана
too
либо
good
с тем, что
become the
кто-то
reason for
начал,
leaks.
например, готовить презентацию за
Somebody
5 минут до
started to
выступления в
work with the
самолете,
presentation
ночью,
just
не
5 minutes
выспавшись, и
before the
поэтому
presentation
опубликовал
without proper
просто
sleep,
скриншот со ссылками
and they
на
just
какие-нибудь документы.
published
Это кто-то
a
из
screenshot
руководителей
with
был
links to
очень недоволен
different
действиями сотрудников, скажем, я
documents.
сейчас вас научу
Some of the
работать.
managers
Записал
were
встречу в Zoom,
very angry
опубликовал, и там утекли очень
with
интересные
their
данные.
employees.
А
They
также
recorded
популярная
a Zoom
причина
meeting,
утечек — это
published it,
студенты.
and
Потому что в
it
компанию
leaked a
приходит
lot of
радостный
sensitive
студент,
data.
и молодым
And obviously,
поделиться своим счастьем, он заводит
students
телеграм-канал, и
get
случайно что-то
part of a
публикует.
company, they start a Telegram channel, and
И
occasionally
когда мы
they
говорим
publish some
о
sensitive data
исследовании
there
последствий
too.
утечек,
Obviously,
надо
they
всегда
wouldn't want
понимать,
to do
что
so,
у
but it
каждого
happens.
сервиса есть свои особенности, которые
Different
могут быть
services
для
have
ребят
different
неочевидны.
peculiarities,
То есть, например,
and
в
they might
Телеграме
not be
очень
that
удобно искать
obvious.
чаты,
For example, in Telegram, it's very easy
но
and
при этом
convenient to look
в
for
какой-то
chats.
момент для крупных компаний
But
там
at some
оказывается
point,
слишком много мусорных чатов, что
it
зачастую
becomes
даже зная
too
название
hard to
чата, вам будет
handle
его сложно найти.
chats. Even if you know
По
the
ICQ,
name
как я
of a
раньше
channel,
рассказывал, это сейчас
it will be hard
весьма актуальный
for a bigger
источник
company
утечек, потому что
to
там
do.
достаточно свежие
For
данные.
ICQ,
Его многие
it's a big
компании
problem
чуть-чуть
too.
забросили, потому что перешли на другие
Many companies
платформы,
stopped
и
using
там
this
очень
because they
много чатов, в
migrated to different
которых
platforms,
содержится,
and there are a
например,
lot of different
информация о
chats
заказах
that has
пользователей,
information
где очень
on
много сотрудников, которые
customer clients
пользуются,
and
чтобы
customer
получить
assignments,
доступ к
and many
большому количеству критичных
employees
данных,
used to
достаточно
use
купить
this
аккаунт
before.
одного из
So
уволившихся
you just have to
сотрудников.
buy an
В Google
account of
документах
one of the former
есть
employees and
моя
you will get
любимая
access to this
фишка,
data.
которая позволяет
In Google
искать
Documents,
данные.
it is possible
Это
to
то,
look for
что у
data.
Google документов есть
Google
история.
Documents
И
have
если файл
history.
доступен для
And
публичного
if a
редактирования,
file
то
is
любой, кто
available for
имеет
public editing,
доступ по
then
ссылке,
anyone who has
может просмотреть
access
всю историю. И частая
will
ситуация,
be able to look through
кто-то
the history.
опубликовал ссылку на файл,
And
сотрудник
sometimes
безопасности
people
зашел,
publish
посмотрел, что,
link,
в принципе, ничего критичного
security
нет.
people
Но
would
если он
go
откроет
there,
вкладку истории и посмотрит, он
see that
обнаружит, что раньше там
there is
была
nothing
выгрузка
sensitive.
всех
But
данных
previously,
клиентов компании.
maybe it had the
И,
complete
наверное,
data
примерно
set of all the
половина
clients of a
документов,
company.
которые я находил,
And basically 50% of Google documents had very interesting sensitive data in its history. And going back to my presentation in 2021, I had a prediction that in the future there will be more smaller chats, and this is what happened. And many of them are basically garbage chats, which make it harder to look for potential leaks. There will be many left chats, and that's why it's easier to look for this information in ICQ. There will be more problems with undisclosed chats, which can be used and links that contain a lot of sensitive information. And a piece of advice, when looking for leaks, you should look for data where it can appear, not where it's comfortable to look for it. If your employees don't use Telegram, you shouldn't look for the data leaks on Telegram. Obviously, you should look some different platform. And oftentimes, customers have some problems because their companies can be secure, protected, employees be very attentive, but a contractor or subcontractor could publish a link to their Telegram channel where they say how great it is to work with you, and they might publish some very sensitive information which would allow hackers to get access to your infrastructure. And this is what happened in one of the cases for alarm system company. And sometimes they can be inadequate in responding. Maybe you have a full-fledged bug bounty company, but maybe not. For example, a researcher didn't send you data, but sent the subcontractor who leaked the data. And the subcontractor starts to threaten them that they will put the researcher to jail, and this could become a problem. And then the researcher would be very angry with your company, and they will decide just to sell the data instead. Here's a very interesting point. Service got closed, maybe got sold, but the data is still available in the cloud. So, for example, I have a few links to leaks from banks which were closed quite a while ago. And the companies which were owners of them, they said they don't care about this data, they will not close this data, and they do not want to do anything with this. It means that this data just waits to be leaked. Or when the service would delete it due to inactivity, or when it ends its own life. And another point, you buy a certain service, you have bug bounty program, and somebody starts to talk about many leaks in the service, and you can spend your whole bug bounty budget. But if you don't pay, researchers will become angry. So what are you supposed to do? It's not clear.
Я бы сказал, слайдов, на которые я бы хотел, чтобы вы обратили внимание, и если это единственное,
and here's the slide you should pay attention to. If it's anything you take from this recommendation, it's the single most important slide. These are simple recommendations how you can find leaks in your organization. First and foremost, you should ask your employees, ask your colleagues. Just as was mentioned before, there are programs where employees could say that they believe there is some potential threat, potential security breach, and you would be amazed how many people are ready to share their ideas if you just ask them. Next point, I think it's a good idea to look through different databases and knowledge bases, what kind of cloud services are used by your employees. Take a look at different documents, and if your knowledge system has different version history, you should take a look at the previous versions, because links are deleted, but it still has the data. And after that, you should just go through all the links, check cross-reference links, try to receive the access, because maybe there will be a protected document which has all the links to other protected documents with sensitive information. You can also do it manually and analyze open source, like going through Telegram chats, try and use some kind of tools to look for leaks. There are quite a lot of them, and I would recommend listening to the presentations of our colleagues who talk about leaks. These could give you some very interesting ideas to follow. And another point is when you have a lot of data, what kind of web services are used by your employees, you should see if there is somebody who left your company years ago. Maybe somebody moved to a different company that they still have the access. But what would happen if multiple people do so? It's better to follow these kind of problems and close them as soon as possible. The lack of tools is a big problem. If an employee has a problem to solve and they do not have a tool, a secure and safe tool, they would use something else. It will be unsecure and unsafe. Because for many people, when they have to decide between losing money and violating the information security rights just a little bit, you can guess which way they will go. And to sum up my presentation, many old leaks can be found. These data are relevant, they are either updated or still are relevant. In some cases, they become even more sensitive. Some sources cannot be closed for years. In some cases, because the company who owned the data do not care about them, and in some cases, who own the cloud services do not want to work with you, and they would ignore all the requests, including the ones where you ask to close the data. In some cases, the older the data leak, the more dangerous it can become. Many services have a problem that you cannot control them 100%, and users would open and reopen links to different documents. Malicious users and researchers would find them and either send them to bug bounty again and again and use waste money, or they will use them in to their own benefit. It's very important to work with bug bounty, even if you're not ready to pay a lot of information, if you're not ready to pay a lot of money for it. It's important to talk to your users. And there are simple ways to look for leaks. Basically, in a week, you can look for your database, and you'll be able to find very interesting things. And those tools cover many problems. And researchers can find those bugs, and you can alleviate all these problems. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your attention. You can contact me. Here's the information on the slide. You can either write me an email or use a Telegram chat bot. And I wanted also to say a few words about PSB Bank. We have great vacancies for junior specialists, for middle or senior specialists. So you can come and we might discuss this later. And now I would like to move the Q&A session, and I will try to answer all of them because we don't have too many. Do you check the data which might have something to do with your clients or customers? And do you notify them about the leaks? Do you do this within the very confined dates? Because not many companies acknowledge data leaks due to various reasons. Well, personally, I can say that all the data which were found, I try to pass on to the specific department, and our colleagues work really fast and really well. Second question, are there dedicated leaked data to get specific remuneration for a bug bounty. So somebody leaked data, and then somebody else got money for bug bounty program. That's actually a very good question, because it's basically an endless money generator. On the one hand, yes, these problems would happen. Yes, it's very hard to do something with this. But I believe that the consequences of launching a bug bounty and finding a real bug, a real vulnerability, is much more better compared to your potential losses if you just pay your own employees for this kind of con scheme. I think this is a very good question, and please raise your hand. Yes, we should give a gift to this person.